Hey, pilot, welcome to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. Today, I'm having a conversation with Jared Butler, and we have two really cool conversations, like two stovepipes of conversations. First, we talk about backcountry flying in Idaho, austere environments, flying through snow and like fire spotting and like all the different stuff. It's pretty interesting. Mostly for me, like I've never done that. I don't know anything about it. And it just seems so cool. Like, seems like, man, if I could just get a chance to go out there, out to the West and do some of that amazing flying, like that's the freedom. That's the excitement of flying and the great part of aviation. So many cool things. And so I wanted to bring that to you. Now, the second part is equally cool and super badass. Jared is an AC-130 gunship pilot. And if you don't know what the AC-130 gunship is, do me a favor. Pause this video, hop over, type in AC-130 gunship, and watch some YouTube videos on that stuff. It will blow your mind. We talk about what it's like flying the plane, a bunch of CRM stuff and complexities and just the transition between backcountry flying, AC-130 gunship flying. Just craziness, y'all. It's really good. I wish we had a top secret clearance on this episode so I could dive down deeper into a bunch of other questions, but it's what we got. So I hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed it because I certainly did. All right. So sit back, relax. Let's get ready for pushback. It all started as a spark. Maybe it was the sound of jets racing across the sky, or the feeling of your heart racing as you watch a crop duster flying low and slow. Even then, you knew you were meant to fly. For pilots, it's more than just a job. It's a calling. The early mornings, the long hours, the relentless training, you didn't do it for the money. You did it for that moment. That moment when the wheels lift off and the earth falls away beneath you. But flying is just the beginning. The journey to your dream job takes more than just skill in the sky. It takes strategy on the ground and a lifetime of learning.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. Learn how to go from good to great, from flight school to regional to major, and from hopeful to hired. Whether you're sharpening your skills, building your resume, or preparing for that big interview, this is where pilots come to level up. Let's get ready for pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
All right, Jared, my friend, how are you, bub?
Hey, it's a cool day in Florida. It's a rarity. I'm enjoying it.
You're giving it away that we're recording this kind of like close to fall. So who knows? Somebody's going to be listening to this like 3 years from now in the middle of summer and be like, well, cool day in Florida. What's he talking about?
That's right.
Man, so you have had a pretty amazing background. Tell me, first year in Air Force, dude. So give me some background on you.
Yeah, so actually started flying in high school. I had some uncles that flew, and I bust a lot of tables to get my private license, and got that shortly after graduation. And that was right about the time when you have to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And so went to flight school in Central Washington University. Did the CFI gig for a couple of years, and man, hats off to the CFIs that are out there. Those guys are just crushing it with the hours they put in. Those are not easy hours.
Buddy, it's a lot of work.
It sure is. Flew Part 135 in the Idaho backcountry for a couple of years. Funnest I've ever had in an aircraft.
Yeah.
And that was right around, shortly after 9/11. And I already had applications into the Air Force, was accepted, and then began the Air Force career. So T6, and then kind of an oddity at the time, T-44s with the Navy.
Yeah.
And then got into C-130s. So started flying the MC-130, so NVG low level, lights out landing, helicopter air refueling. And then they converted our squadron to gunships, and I've been there ever since. And this is my second different model of the gunship I've been flying.
Dude, all right. We've got a lot to unpack. So that's just a primer for the pilot listening that we have a lot of cool stuff we're going to talk about today. And so did you grow up on the West Coast? You grew up out in Washington?
So grew up in Idaho, a small town called McCall. It's a couple hours north of Boise.
Listen, man, I've been talking to more and more people from Boise. It's been wild. Like people are like, oh yeah, no, it's the best town on earth.
Yeah, that is our place to retire, and the kids are talking about it all the time now.
Dude, that is so like it's funny how like that it used to be a nowhere town and now it's like the town. So go be careful. Don't tell anybody about it though. Your real estate prices are going to get jacked up.
I'll tell them once I move there.
That's right. I'll hold off on releasing this until you move there in 10 years.
All right.
Great. So backcountry flying in Idaho, like if you've never heard of backcountry flying, how would you describe it to somebody?
So if you look at a map of Idaho, it's the largest wilderness in the lower 48.
Really?
There's 2 wilderness areas. They're about 3 million acres. And before they were established, there were several airstrips that were built. And so those were grandfathered in.
Oh.
So the only way you're going to access that airstrip, unless you want to be on a horse for several days or walk or on a raft, is by aircraft. And so flew a variety of Forest Service personnel in, all sorts of outdoor enthusiasts, and a bunch of miscellaneous work for the Forest Service, I'm sure we'll get to later.
Yeah. So talk to me. First off, what kind of plane are you using? And is there any, like, if you're landing on these old, like, far away runways where nobody's taking care of them, it seems like you need a bunch of special equipment. Is that something, like, is there a specific, like, hey, this is a backcountry aircraft and, like, this is what we need to do to set it up to make sure it's robust enough?
Yeah, most of fleet was turbo 206s. So they carry about 1,000 pounds worth on any given day, depending on the density altitude. Islanders. So it's made by a company in Wight, England, Isle of Wight.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a multi-engine, it's a twin piston engine aircraft, high wing, very good slow capability to allow us to maneuver in the canyons and short takeoff and landing.
Canyon flying. So you guys are getting down low and like helicopter style?
Not quite a helicopter style. But the terrain goes up to 10,000 feet, and some of the deeper canyons are down to 2,000 feet. And when the weather gets poor, it is not point-to-point flying. It is down in the canyons to maneuver around.
Well, do you have like a moving map or just like a paper chart, or are you just like, man, I'm glad I know this place. I'm going left and right. How do you navigate that?
So that was the biggest learning curve, was getting to know the terrain. A VFR sectional just does not provide the detail. So you'd actually get some Forest Service maps where the different peaks and the streams are actually labeled in old landmarks. And instead of the standard VFR reporting, hey, I'm 10 miles south at 3,500, it's, hey, I'm coming up over Fitsum Summit at 7,500 eastbound.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Do you have, like, in the aircraft, is there some kind of GPS, like specialty GPS that you're using that's got all the terrain features shaded and everything? Or is it just like, well, we're just kind of doing this and we know what we're doing?
Yeah, it's a point-to-point only GPS when I was flying.
Holy crap, dude.
The longer I flew, the more comfortable I came with the terrain. And in fact, you'd memorize it to the point where, hey, if I can't cross this particular saddle or ridge at 7,500, I know there's another one 20 miles to the south that I can get through at 6,500.
Is fuel planning like a big deal?
It is. You always want to leave yourself different options for navigation, but as you get to option 2, 3, 4, it starts eating into that fuel. And it was, light GA aircraft for fuel quantity gauges. And so it's the float gauges, which technically are only accurate empty. But we'd stick the tanks every time, so I'd know the starting quantity, and we had good fuel flows. And so it was just the basics they'll teach in flight school, right? Fuel burn and time you're burning it.
But those basics are like the life and death portion of that.
Yeah.
That's insane. Do you have to worry about like stuff on there? Like there's an elk on the runway. What do we do? Like you got some dude with a 50 cal hanging out on a gunner's belt, like blasting that thing, or what?
That'd be nice. But every airstrip we'd go into, I'd usually try and fly by it, especially early morning, late evening. That's when the animals are more likely to be out there. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these trips, they're one way in, one way out. And in fact, several of them, once you're on final, there is no go around because of the terrain.
How do you figure out the winds?
So I'll do a quick primer just on canyon meteorology. So let's say we have a north-south canyon. As the sun comes up, one side is going to heat up more than the other because it's going to be in the sun. Other side will be in the shade. So there's automatically some up air on one side, down air on the other side. And as the sun arcs across the horizon, of course, that switches. So good rising air on one side, sinking air on the other side. Generally, as things heat up, the wind will start blowing up canyon, and then toward the afternoon, evening hour, it'll start blowing down canyon. And it gets real interesting when the two canyons converge or narrow, because then there's the Venturi effect. And there's different terrain features. Some will heat up more quicker than others. So one of the challenges that we've always had is hot air heats up rock differently than trees, than a river. And a lot of these strips are on a river. So as soon as you transition from over rocks or over trees to the river, you're going to get some sinking air. And so it's anticipating that. And actually, we were checked out in each individual airstrip. We weren't given just carte blanche to go anywhere because there are so many unique features to each one, including the latest point you can go around. Company policy was to get checked out at each individual airstrip.
Oh, man. So I think about, I mean, even you talking about Venturi, right? One of the byproducts, please, I hope I'm right on this, but one of the byproducts, with that increase in pressure is a change in temperature, right? And so at a high DA with a big temperature change, you could have massive variations in the type of air that your wings are biting into and the power that your prop's getting to, right?
You'd find more unstable air there, so as the velocity increases, and then depending on how it's blowing over terrain, it's very much like rocks in a river. It's not going to be a smooth laminar flow. It's going to be a very rough and turbulent flow. And
I never thought in my life I would hear laminar flow again, so thank you for saying that.
Oh, hey,
it's amazing.
We'll call that complete for aerodynamic refresher today.
Oh, buddy. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for not saying adiabatic lapse rate. Tell me, what are these runways made of? Are they grass? Are they gravel? Are they rocks? Are they just dirt? What is it?
So the nicer ones are grass, and they're actually pretty well maintained. And it is a wilderness area, so the only way they're maintaining them is actually by horse team and trimming it like that. But the majority of them are just rock. And through a lot of volunteers, they're kept in pretty good shape.
Man, it seems super dangerous, but also just about as much fun as you can have in an aircraft.
It was a ton of fun. There's some times I was certainly concerned. But you quickly learn your own limits, and the company was really good about reinforcing that.
How often were you flying?
So it was very seasonal. So we'd start in May, go through about November. There'd be a handful of trips in the winter. The peak of the season, I'd fly 14 days because after 14 days, especially with our Forest Service contract, you were mandated to have a day off. In terms of flights per day, it'd be 3 would be on the low side, 5 would be on the high side, but they're all fairly short, 45 minutes to an hour.
Are you ever going out there and sticking around for the night?
So actually, I did a pretty cool trip where I kind of talked myself into doing that. One of our big customers was flying in river rafters. We'd fly in all their gear, several airplanes worth. Because as the river flows go down, they can't put in at the top of the river. And so we fly them further down just to make sure they can get out in the time they have budgeted. So there's a trip, and I was with my director of ops. He was in a different other aircraft. And I said, hey, we're dropping off all the gear here, and then the guides are going to float to another airstrip that we're going to fly the passengers in tomorrow. What if I drop the airplane off there? You pick me up, drop me off to where the guides are still getting the boats ready. I'll float down there, spend the night, and then fly out the next morning and get the guests. And so brought a sleeping bag with me and slept in the back of the Islander.
How was that?
That was great. Islanders actually got quite a bit of room. but the guides I flew in frequently, it was a free trip in a wilderness river. And we actually
Man,
ended up doing it as it got dark out, and we were doing it by a headlamp. But fortunately, they knew the river well enough, just like I knew the river canyons, that it really was a non-issue.
that's wild. So funny little not relevant side note. A couple weeks ago, I took my Anna, my wife, and I took the big kids on a little river rafting adventure down the Chattahoochee River, which is America's most boring river. But, it's got a couple little tiny rapids in the middle of it and stuff like that. And we were banging off rocks and just terrible. I can't imagine, I'm a million% amateur and also in this giant river with no technicality whatsoever. And I was still thinking, like, what am I going to do if one of these kids falls out of the boat?
Yeah.
And you're like, we're going at night with headlamps and it's going to be awesome. These guys, like, they got so much peyote, it's going to be a party. Like,
Yeah, they trusted me in the airplane, and I certainly trusted them in the raft. So it was a great relationship to have.
that's so cool. Wow, dude. I feel like that is just some of the most fun you can have in aviation. And just I go out when I go out west, there's somebody here listening in the West and they're just taking it for granted. But like every time I'm doing a transcon and every time we're going somewhere like into Salt Lake or into Steamboat or whatever, and I just look at that terrain and I'm like, oh, that's so amazing. And what a beautiful opportunity that you had to go do that.
It was amazing. I look forward to the next day of flying, even if it was day 12.
Did you ever have any problems with like icing or anything?
So we were strictly day VFR, because we were well below any type of Aroka or MEA. There were no approaches in there. On a beautiful clear day, it was enjoyable flying. But you'd get the days where the ceiling would start dropping, the viz would start dropping, and that's where you're thinking, how many other options do I have to get from point A to point B? And that's where knowing the terrain was critical.
Is this something where you could pop up and get an IFR pickup somewhere if you needed to?
It'd be difficult. I'm going off memory, but I think the MEAs were low
14,000
teens.
feet.
And so that's tough to do. And we didn't carry oxygen.
Yeah.
And even then, now you're punching up through stuff. We were probably going to pick up a fair amount of ice.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Later on in the season, I'd always fly with an overnight bag. I never knew if I was going to be overnight somewhere. But later in the season, I flew with a sleeping bag.
And a gun.
Didn't have a gun, but had a
gun.
sleeping bag.
That's the whole point of being American. Get to have a gun.
Flew in a lot of hunters toward the end of the season. They had me covered.
Yeah. What were they going out for? What are they looking for?
Earlier in the season, deer, and then later on elk. So I flew plenty of deer and elk out. In fact, I can still tell you a quarter of an elk dressed out weighs 80 pounds.
80 pounds. Oh, so they would dress it out. Yeah, that makes good sense.
Yeah.
Now, how much of that quarter of an elk were you getting as a tip for thanks for coming and taking us?
Yeah, they'd throw me some steaks.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Where do you tip the pilot? Is that protocol? Like, hey, look, I'm taking you out there. Like, thanks for the $50 or whatever.
Every once in a while, it certainly wasn't expected. And a lot of the customers we had were just repeat customers. We'd see them every year. That was their vacation.
Yeah. Were these like super duper rich people or just salt of the earth people that just, this was an affordable thing for them to do?
It's salt of the earth. The hunters, their thing was they're going to go camping out there for a week. And, we'd do several trips to get all their gear in there.
A week?
They lived in luxury.
Several trips is a lot of. I'm imagining like that doesn't. I can't compute that in my head because I've got my RAI tent and one sleeping bag and like a jug of water, and that's kind of what's going through my head. But you're bringing in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, these are large wall tents, actual small cast iron stoves. I flew a 206 load of firewood in one time. And I asked the guys about that. I said, you're going to the middle of the woods. Why not just get your own wood out there? And they said, no, when we're done hunting, we want to sip bourbon and tell stories, and we don't want to be chopping firewood. And this is worth the price for us.
Interesting.
Hey, all about that.
Did you bring in a 206 full of bourbon?
I've had some clients on a river trip. We loaded half a 206 full of cases of wine.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Good for them. I love that. I know when I lived in Africa, there were a couple of safari companies that would fly you to different parts of the Serengeti to they would fly you out there and they bring all your stuff, and they even had fuel like bladders in different places where they could stop and refuel and stuff. It was wild. Give me a story, man. Like, I'm sure you've got a million.
Actually, before I get to the story, I want to tell you about one other type of flying we did.
Okay.
Did a lot of flying for the Forest Service. And so you'll see these TFRs pop up for forest fires. I was in the middle of the TFR. We were flying what was called air attack. So I'd have a senior firefighter with me, and between all the rotary wing and fixed wing, I'd do the deconfliction of traffic, and he would coordinate where they need to move various either personnel or equipment back and forth. He'd coordinate who needs airdrops for fire retardant, and I just manage the air picture. So very much like a FAC-A, except for firefighting.
Dude, so I bet that was really interesting having done that and then rolling into a gunship role like that. Those two, like, what interesting similarities.
Yeah, managing the stack, except instead of putting out fires, we're putting fires down.
That's right. Mo fun.
That's right.
Was it real smoky? Did you have to, like, again, you just said you didn't have oxygen, things like that. I've flown into like Santa Rosa and stuff that's had big fires around, and it's smoky and it's IFR and it's difficult to fight your way through, and it smells bad.
Yeah, so we stayed visual because we'd have to see the ground and the other aircraft below us to make all the coordination happen. But we'd usually reserve one aircraft for that because it would smell like a forest fire for the next several days.
Yeah, for sure. How long were you on station for that?
Almost an entire large mug of coffee. You learn that the first time, not to have a large mug of coffee, right? 3.5 hours, and then we'd get swapped out by another aircraft and go down, take a break, grab some food, and then usually roll out again in the afternoon, evening for another 3.5 hour, 4 hour flight. Wow.
What a long day.
There was a time at the end of the long day, we were working a fire. Aircraft were pretty much done flying, and then we started to hear someone on the radio that sounded fairly panicked. And what we're able to get out of them, there were a couple of firefighters driving around the perimeter, and they had rolled their vehicle.
Oh, no.
So they had no idea where they were at, and just from the sound coming over the radio, they were in shock, and one of them was hurt pretty bad.
Oh, no.
And, so we said, hey, can you hear an airplane? And so we began flying almost like a grid pattern until they said, yeah, we can start hearing an airplane. So I told the firefighter next to me, I said, we're going to get probably lower than what you're comfortable with, so we have a chance of seeing these guys, and so we can narrow down where they're at. So we dropped down a lot lower than we would performing an air attack mission, and eventually we're able to find where they had rolled the truck. And so I started coordinating over the Forest Service dispatch to get some helos in there. And he was talking to them on their radio frequency, helping them out just with first aid and getting patched up. And it was one of these things that the sun was going down at the same time, so we were limited on daylight to bring the helicopter in there. But their radios were not line of sight to anyone else, and we happened to be rolling out of there later that day, and that was the only thing that kind of paid off in their fortune.
Yeah, you don't want to be in shock in that kind of environment when the sun goes down.
Yeah, for sure. And help was a long ways away.
And an extract, I mean, even thinking about the resident helicopter guy, like the distance that you're going to have to travel and return and maintain, thinking about your fuel, but also like doing an extract in possibly an environment with big trees and big rocks and maybe even cliffs and things like that and high DAs. It can get those that Swiss cheese can line up very quickly and be very dangerous.
It can, and they had no idea where they're at. So, fortunately, we were able to pinpoint them and get some help in their direction.
How long did it take to find them?
It seemed like forever, but it was probably 15 minutes.
Oh, really? That short?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
We had an idea where they're at, but after flying around and then getting lower, we were able to pick them up pretty quick.
That's pretty great. Good job.
Yeah.
You should have joined the Coast Guard instead, Bo.
Yeah.
Man, well, thank goodness for everybody being right where they needed to be. All right, give me a story about flying in and getting in a tight spot.
I think I sent you a picture of one of them where it was entitled "De-icing the aircraft" in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
So as we get to the fall in the backcountry, weather tends to get worse a little bit quicker with snowstorms, and that's when I'm packing a sleeping bag because sometimes the best option is to get on the ground and set it out. And one of those days just happened to be that day. Flying into drainage called Big Creek, and the ceiling was dropping, the visibility was getting worse, and it's like I'm not going to be able to take that and hit the confluence of the Middle Fork River. And so turned around because I knew I had a couple airstrips between me and back home. And as I turned around and realized there's some more snow coming toward the direction. So I've got two options to divert to. So chose to divert to Cabin Creek. Now, earlier I mentioned that a lot of these airstrips are one way in, one way out. And so I'm thinking once I land there, I was also hearing other traffic do the same thing, start to divert. And so you can't exactly get to the end and then back taxi. And now the guy on final is not going to be able to go around.
Yeah.
And you're limited to line of sight comms. So kind of waited at the end of the runway as much as I could. Had the landing light on, so at least they could see that I was at the end of the runway. And another company pilot rolled in the Islander, so the twin engine aircraft. But the nice thing about Cabin Creek, it's a pretty steep runway. In fact, you really don't even need to touch the brakes. So once he landed, he turned around. He talked to me on the radio and says, "Hey, there's one other 206 coming in, but why don't you get behind me?" And there was a large parking spot about halfway down the runway. So we both taxied down there. Next aircraft came in. He diverted as well. And so there's two 206s and an Islander, and there happened to be some hunters that we'd brought in a couple days later that were camped there. So they brewed up some coffee for us, and we waited for the snowstorm to pass for a couple hours.
Wow.
And then it's, time to de-ice these aircraft. Fortunately, it was a light, dry snow. But we used the shop room, got the wings perfectly clean, rest of the fuselage perfectly clean. Fortunately, it didn't get warm enough to start turning it into type of to ice or liquid, and we were able to take off and finish the day.
Man, like just sitting there. Did you just sit in the plane while it's like snowing on you, or were you with those hunters like in a tent? What were you doing?
We just shut down. So shut all the aircraft down. And it was the three pilots and the hunters there. And we just kind of hung out around the campfire for a bit.
Man, I guess you've always got, do you bring kind of an emergency kit and like a bunch of warm clothes and like a change of clothes and all those things every single time?
In the later part of the year, I'll bring warmer clothes and a sleeping bag. They didn't have sat phones for all of us back then. It's coming up on 20 years ago. Now it's certainly quite a bit different, especially with the emergency beacons you have.
Yeah. Welcome to 20 years from like everything's 20 years ago in my life. So welcome to the party.
That's right.
I used to be cool. You're still cool though, because you're doing the gunships, man. Like that's a huge transition. And I know you flew MC-130s and now you're AC-130s. I would love for you, if you wouldn't mind, spend a couple minutes talking about the mission of the AC-130 and what you guys do, and maybe share a story?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mission of the gunship, we're part of Air Force Special Operations Command. So we're the air component of Special Operations Command, which we are there really for the sole reason of supporting the special operations teams around the world. And in the gunship, we provided close air support. And so we had a variety of weapons to do so, out of the 30 millimeter gun, 105 millimeter gun, and several variants of missiles and bombs up to about 250 pounds. So for the military folks, we did have the GBU-39. In fact, we had the laser-guided version as well. And so plenty of options to choose from, either a very low collateral damage weapon or something that really had some decent penetration capability in a much larger warhead.
Yeah, a lot of people probably have seen videos on YouTube and things like that about just things getting blasted from the sky, turning, just the tracers, just a straight line of tracers like coming down, raining down from this thing. What was it like the first time you sat in there and you guys started employing some of your weapons?
Yeah, so we don't have the tracers, because we really don't want to have that signature from the aircraft as much as possible. Actually, the first time I fired the 105 was on a check ride.
Oh, really?
Yep. I'd shot the 30 mil several times. We'd just added the 105 and happened to be time for a check ride. It was a test line as we were developing the 105 on the aircraft, and looked over at the evaluator and I said, I've never shot the 105. And he says, it's like the 30, but a bigger boom, and you'll feel it a little more. He says, but it's the same principle and it's the same crew coordination. And so actually I still have the spent brass out in the garage of the first round I shot out the 105.
Was that surprising?
It's not a huge kick. It barely displaces the ball on the inclinometer. You'll feel it. It's a little nudge, but it's a really good recoil system.
That's cool.
You certainly don't want a 105 millimeter howitzer putting a lot of stress on the airframe.
I remember we had that little, we had an M240 and a 50 cal when I first started out in the Navy, and the pintle for it is just right behind the seats. And so when they start firing, like, it is right behind your head, and it is so tremendously loud. And there's no recoil, nothing. You just shakes the helicopter a little bit. So that's, wow. I bet crew resource management is a huge part of your life as doing what you do, because you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you got to talk to a bunch of people.
Yeah. So typical crew would be the two pilots. We have a load master who sits up in the front, and then 4 gunners, and then a weapon system officer and a combat systems officer. So WISO and CISO. WISO and CISO would run the sensors and initiate many of the weapons. And then as the crew, we'd make that engagement possible. But oftentimes on a standard combat mission, listening to about 3 to 4 different radios at different volumes. Priority radios I got at a higher volume, less priority at a lower volume. And we also have individual nets too. So the gunners will have an individual net. The WISO and CISO will do coordination amongst themselves on an individual net, and then the pilots will have an individual net. And then we'll have one as a whole. So it can get very busy, especially where there's multiple friendly locations and taking fire from different locations. So to coordinate all of that between the WISO and the CISO, the pilots, the gunners on one net with several other radio frequencies going, it could be a challenge. So you learn real quick to prioritize, be brief, be concise, and stick to TTPs and contracts because that's what works.
Yeah, I got to work with you guys for a little bit, and when I was doing some tier 1 work a while back, and it was amazing. And you're very surgical on the things you do and how you do it, and it seems to me like there's a lot of opportunities for things to go wrong, but there's just this weird surgical precision that you guys just like go out with, and it's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then like off station. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a deep relationship with the ground forces. They really are our supported customer, and their standards are incredibly high.
Yep. Yep. That is so cool, buddy. So, you've been doing this for a while. You've been doing it for a long time. And at some point, everybody gets out of the military.
Right.
And so what are you thinking about? What do you want to do?
It was certainly a tough decision. I love the mission of the gunship, but it's also that time in my career where there's less flying and more other responsibilities. And I'd like to inverse that. I would like to have more flying in my life. Have a 8-year-old son, 11-year-old girl, and my wife, and we would like a permanent residence. So we decided a couple of years ago that, hey, let's start going in that direction. So made the decision to retire. I'll do so in October of 26.
All right.
And looking.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Really excited to get back into commercial aviation again. Very open. So there's a lot of Part 121 opportunities out there, a lot of carriers I'm looking at. Our priority is to live in Boise, so that narrows it down to some shorter commutes out of there.
Mm-hmm.
But haven't dismissed the fractional opportunities either, especially as a commuter, or some of the ACMI carriers out there.
Yeah, a lot of that. Here's the hard part: is you only know your deployment cycle. That's all you know right now, right?
Right.
And you've got some buddies that probably do all those different, probably do ACMI. I mean, I know everybody that does all the different things, but all you can hear is the things that they're doing, but the experience of, am I gone for 14 days? Am I gone for 17 days? Am I gone for 3 days and then 3 days off and then 4 days? And what works best for you and your bride and those littles? That's the trickiest one to start to figure out, man. It's gonna be your hardest decision.
Yeah, I think the great thing is there's just so much of a variety of flying out there. There's something that's really going to fit what we want out of life the best.
Yeah. Are you flying right now? Are you on some staff boring tour?
No, I'm actually trying to fly about once a week.
All right.
So I'm the lead gunship evaluator up at the headquarters. And so fortunate by AFI, by regulation, I actually have to go fly and stay proficient and current. Great excuse to get out of the office. I could pull that card out.
Dude, yeah, for sure. The other part is going to be the pack that you're carrying, being the lead evaluator, like managing all the different units and making sure that all those junior officers that are doing all the evaluations and stuff like that you are in charge of, like all this different stuff and all the paperwork you got to send up, like all of that goes away. And then what? Then you start a podcast because like there's nothing else to do, right? But that was a surprising thing. Also, you miss your friends. Like you are all of a sudden just with your family, and you've moved to a new place, and there's no wives club for your wife, and there's no, like, you better like hope you find a good church and like a good little unit of people. Like that's a hard thing. That's probably the hardest thing for me when I got out, and still like moving here to Georgia. Like it's hard to make friends with an airline pilot schedule. So heads up. Yeah,
we anticipate kind of a big culture shock. But Boise, I still have some family out there. I still have some friends around the area, but it's still going to be fairly new to us.
Yeah, it's a big change, and your hair is going to grow long, and you're going to get fat. Good luck. Just like me. Oh man, dude, listen, pal, I am so thankful that you came and shared these stories, because you have had a crazy career, and you're a person that just like, I'm just going to go do this thing. It's a crazy thing. I'm going to go do it. Like, just same thing with AC-130s. Like, it's a crazy thing. Like, let's go do it. And you've done all of it, dude. So keep it up.
Yeah. Fortunately, I was able to know what I wanted senior year of high school, and I've been in aviation ever since.
Well, brother, I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you being part of the community. And Jared, you're just such a cool guy and a great conversation. So thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, hey, Nick, thank you for the show. I've listened for a couple of years now, and it's such a good resource to have out there. You know, I've learned parts of the aviation business that I've never heard before, and then having the different guests you have on and hearing right from the mouth of some of the top recruiters and hiring authorities out there, that goes a long way.
All right, pilots, that's a wrap on this episode, and I know what you're thinking. You need to make yourself a little bit better. So how do you make yourself a little bit better? You tighten up your resume. So here's what I want you to do. Go over to my website, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and you can download my free resume template. It is tight, organized, and it's the perfect pilot resume. It's just something I like to do for the pilot group, and it is free to you. So go over there, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and download your free resume template. While you're over there, look at all the services that we offer. Lots of great interview prep, lots of great application review. Everything you need to be a professional pilot is right there. spitfireelite.com/podcast. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next episode.